The pen felt impossibly heavy in my hand. It was a vintage Mont Blanc, heavy brass coated in cold, black resin. It was the kind of pen you use to sign a peace treaty or a death warrant. I sat in the mahogany-paneled conference room of my attorney's office in downtown Chicago, the leather chair squeaking slightly as I shifted my weight. The air conditioning hummed above us, a cold, rhythmic, industrial drone. It was entirely indifferent to the fact that I was about to legally orphan myself. I was 62 years old. That is an age when most men are bouncing soft, babbling grandchildren on their knees. They're planning cross-country RV trips with their siblings, drinking cheap beer on pontoon boats, settling into the twilight of their lives surrounded by the people who have known them since they were children. Instead, I was staring at a towering stack of crisp, legal-sized documents that would permanently, surgically sever every legal, financial, and medical tie to my biological family. I hovered the gold nib of the pen over the signature line on the irrevocable trust agreement. A single drop of ink threatened to fall. My attorney, a man named Harrison, who had known me for 20 years, cleared his throat. It was a wet, nervous sound that echoed in the cavernous room. He had spent the last 6 months trying to talk me out of this. He had sat across from me in restaurants, his brow furrowed, calling the plan reckless. He had called it a psychological break. He had gently, patronizingly suggested I see a grief counselor, a psychiatrist, a priest, anyone but him. He had laid out the charts, the projections, the legal landmines, but I was of sound mind. I had the paperwork to prove it. I had passed the battery of cognitive evaluations with flying colors. I had the immense insulating wealth required to afford this specific, spectacular level of eccentricity. And more importantly, I had the quiet, burning, bone-deep exhaustion of a man who had spent his entire adult life being treated like a human ATM by the very people who shared his DNA. I pressed the nib to the paper. I signed my name. Not my birth name. My new name. Robert Hollis. I had legally dropped my family surname 3 weeks prior, watching the judge stamp the decree with a feeling of pure, weightless elation. With that final stroke of the Mont Blanc, I funded a trust that effectively erased my biological sister, my biological brother, and my 2 adult nephews from my estate entirely. They were gone, evaporated into legal nothingness. They wouldn't get a dime of the wealth I had built. They wouldn't get a single, meaningless say in my medical care. If I ended up on a ventilator, the hospital wouldn't even be allowed to tell them I was there. They would be ghosts to me, just as I had become a mere utility to them. But I wasn't just cutting them out. That would be too simple. People leave their money to dog shelters and art museums all the time. Spite is a common estate planning tool. People die alone in luxury penthouses every day, their bodies found weeks later by the housekeeper. That wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to be alone. The silence of a massive, empty house terrified me. I just wanted a family that wasn't a parasitic infection. So, sitting in that freezing conference room, I decided to build one from scratch. I decided to buy the people, engineer the intimacy, and replace the sloppy, unearned accident of biology with the deliberate, rational, ironclad choice of a social experiment. You have to understand how I got to that room. You have to understand the slow, grinding geological erosion of trust that happens when you are the only one in your family who made it out of the working class. When I sold my logistics company at age 55 for a sum that I won't disclose, but which was enough to ensure my bloodline wouldn't have to clock in for a shift for 3 generations, the dynamic of my life shifted overnight. I stopped being Robert. I stopped being the older brother who liked weekend fishing trips and played aggressively bad golf. I became a structural pillar. I became Robert, the bank. My brother Richard was the first to change. It started subtly. He started pitching me investment opportunities at Thanksgiving dinners. I can still smell the roasted sage and the stale beer on his breath as he cornered me by the kitchen island, his eyes wide and desperate, talking about strip malls and crypto startups. When I declined, politely at first, offering to look over his business plans, and then firmly, the resentment took root. He began talking behind my back. He would tell my sister that I had lost my roots, that wealth had made me arrogant, that I had forgotten where I came from. Yet when he needed $40,000 to save his split-level house from foreclosure, he came to my office. He sat in the chair across from my desk, and he cried. Real, hyperventilating tears. I wrote the check. I slid it across the desk. He took it without looking me in the eye. He never paid it back. And we never spoke of it again. But every time I looked at him at family gatherings, every time I saw him laughing and holding a beer, I saw the exact price of his pride. It was $40,000. My sister, Helen, was worse. She was a master of emotional extortion. She used her children, my 2 nephews, as collateral. If I didn't fund their private college tuitions, fully paid, room and board, no student loans, I was practically condemning them to a life of poverty. "You have so much, Robert," she would say on the phone. I can still hear the pitch of her voice, dripping with that toxic, suffocating mixture of entitlement and victimhood. "It wouldn't even make a dent for you. You wouldn't even notice it's gone. Why are you hoarding it while your own flesh and blood struggles?" When our mother died, the fragile scaffolding of our family collapsed entirely. I handled the arrangements. Of course I did. I paid for the funeral home. I paid the exorbitant estate lawyers. I paid off the lingering, heavy nursing home debts she had accumulated in her final years. While I was standing in the carpeted, lavender-scented showroom of the funeral home, quietly picking out a mahogany casket for the woman who raised us, Richard and Helen were at her house. They were boxing up her antique silverware. I drove to the house to check on them. I walked through the front door, stepping onto the faded floral rug of the home we grew up in, and I heard the shouting. I walked down the hallway and found them red-faced, screaming at each other over who got the grandfather clock that stood in the den. They didn't even look ashamed when they saw me standing in the doorway. They didn't pause to mourn. They just turned their greedy, flushed faces toward me and demanded I mediate. That was the exact moment the blind spot cleared. It was like a sheet of dirty glass shattering in my mind. I looked at their angry, entitled faces and realized that blood is just a biological accident. It is nothing more than shared genetic material. It is an unearned monopoly on your estate and your heart. Society tells us from the moment we are born that family is unconditional. That is the greatest lie ever sold to the human race. It is highly conditional. It is conditioned on guilt. It is conditioned on shared shame, on history, on the unspoken, violent threat that if you don't comply, if you don't open your wallet, if you don't absorb their toxicity, you will be ostracized. My family didn't love me. They loved my utility. I was a load-bearing wall, holding up their unearned comfort, and they fundamentally resented me for the weight I carried. So, sitting in the silence of my car outside my dead mother's house, I decided to fire them. But humans are pack animals. We are not wired for absolute isolation. The prospect of aging alone terrified me. The thought of facing the inevitable physical decline of my 70s and 80s in a sprawling, empty house with only paid, apathetic nurses for company kept me awake at night. I didn't want staff. I wanted a family. I just wanted a family that was vetted. A family that had been put under a microscope. A family that passed the test. A family that chose me just as actively, just as desperately as I chose them. I hired a boutique executive search firm operating out of Manhattan and partnered them with a private, highly discreet psychological evaluation agency. I sat at my desk and drafted a manifesto. It was an advertisement of sorts, a brutally honest job description for a new heritage. I circulated it through highly discreet, private channels, wealth management networks, exclusive alumni boards, private social clubs. The premise was audacious. I was looking for 3 people to form a permanent, legally binding family unit. Generous compensation was guaranteed from day one, escalating to a full, equal, and uncontestable share of a multi-million-dollar estate upon my death. The requirements were absolute. Complete relocation to a shared estate in upstate New York, legally changing their surnames to match mine, severing primary emotional and financial ties with their own toxic backgrounds, and submitting to the most rigorous psychological compatibility testing money could buy. I wasn't looking for roommates. I was looking for the ideal archetypes. I wanted a mother or father figure, someone older, wiser, to provide the grounding, historical presence I had always lacked in my own chaotic youth. I wanted a sibling, a peer, someone in my generational cohort to share the burden of middle age, someone to argue with on politics and share a scotch with. And I wanted a child figure, someone younger, someone hungry, someone to mentor, someone to ultimately pass the legacy down to so the wealth wouldn't just vanish into a corporate charity void. The audition for this new heritage was the most surreal, clinical experience of my life. The agency received hundreds of inquiries within the first month. Most were obvious grifters, people drowning in insurmountable gambling debts, con artists with fake identities, or shrieking narcissists looking for a reality television opportunity. But the agency filtered them out with ruthless efficiency. They ran exhaustive financial background checks. They ran criminal background checks reaching back decades. They performed deep-dive social media scrubs looking for any hint of instability, bigotry, or cruelty. The ones who survived the initial purge and made it to the final rounds were subjected to a psychological gauntlet. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the MMPI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, hours and hours of intense, probing interviews with behavioral psychologists who specialized in trauma and family dynamics. I wasn't looking for saints. Saints don't exist. I was looking for compatibility. I was looking for people whose damage perfectly aligned with my own. I remember sitting in a dark, quiet observation room behind a two-way mirror in a clinical testing facility in Chicago. I was watching a 50-year-old woman named Diane fail the stress test. The psychologist, a calm woman with a clipboard, was pushing Diane on a hypothetical scenario involving a shared bank account and unexpected expenses. I watched Diane's face tighten. I watched her hands grip the arms of her chair. And then she snapped. Her voice elevated into a shrill, defensive screech, revealing a deep-seated, irrational paranoia about control. She was terrified of being vulnerable. She was crossed off the list before she even left the room. After 6 grueling months of searching, reading dossiers, and watching interviews behind glass, we found them. Arthur was 78. He was a retired history professor who wore tweed jackets and smelled faintly of old paper and peppermint. His own biological children had moved to Europe decades ago and hadn't spoken to him in 10 years. He was quiet. He was deeply intellectual, and he carried a profound, dignified sadness in his posture. He wanted a son to talk to. He wanted someone to ask him questions. He became the father figure. Marcus was 54. He had been a highly successful architect in Boston until a brutal, scorched-earth divorce wiped him out financially and emotionally. He had lost his firm, his home, his savings. He had no children. He had no siblings. He was fiercely loyal, a bit cynical, but immensely practical. He understood the legal and financial mechanics of the arrangement perfectly. He didn't dress it up in romance. He became the brother. Elena was 31. She had grown up in the brutal machinery of the foster care system, bouncing from home to home, carrying her life in garbage bags until she finally aged out. She was scrappy. She was fiercely intelligent, working freelance as a graphic designer, but she possessed a feral kind of independence. It was a sharp, biting independence that masked a desperate, clawing need for a safety net. She wanted a father who wouldn't disappear in the middle of the night. She became the daughter. We sat in a circle in the agency's conference room on the Tuesday afternoon we all agreed to move forward. We looked at each other, 4 complete strangers. We were bound by absolutely nothing but a stack of contracts and a shared, desperate desire to outsmart loneliness. We discussed our new identity. We agreed on the surname Hollis. It sounded sturdy. It sounded old, like money and history, even though we were inventing it out of thin air on a Tuesday afternoon in an office park. 2 months later, the Hollis family moved into the shared residence. I had purchased a massive, breathtaking estate in the Hudson Valley specifically for this experiment. It sat on 60 acres of old-growth forest. It had 4 massive master suites, a sprawling communal kitchen with marble countertops, a 2-story library with a rolling ladder, and miles of private walking trails. It was entirely neutral ground. None of us had history there. There were no ghosts of my mother, no echoes of Marcus's ex-wife, no shadows of Elena's foster parents. We were 4 ghosts haunting a brand new house, trying to will ourselves into becoming a family through sheer proximity. But I am a logical man. I knew that moving in together wouldn't magically create intimacy. You can't just put 4 damaged strangers in a multi-million-dollar mansion and expect them to suddenly care about each other. Intimacy isn't a switch you can flip. It usually takes decades. It takes decades of shared Thanksgiving turkeys, of inside jokes born from boredom, of surviving illnesses and tragedies together. I didn't have decades. I was 62. I needed to fast-hack a lifetime of shared memories. I needed to engineer intimacy through forced, concentrated vulnerability. I hired a specialist in group dynamics and trauma bonding. She was expensive, discreet, and ruthless. For the first 3 months in the house, we underwent what the therapist called bonding sprints. It was exhausting. It was highly structured, and it was profoundly physically uncomfortable. We were forced to bypass years of polite, surface-level small talk about the weather and our favorite movies. Every single evening after dinner, we sat in the library around the massive stone fireplace. No phones were allowed, no television. The fire crackled, casting long shadows against the walls of unread books. The therapist would sit in the armchair, look at us, and give us a prompt. We had to answer with total, agonizing honesty. Describe the exact moment you felt most unloved in your life, the therapist said one Tuesday night, the wind howling outside the thick glass windows. I watched Arthur stare into the fire. His frail, spotted hands were trembling slightly on his knees. He cleared his throat and told us about the day his wife died of pancreatic cancer. He told us how his biological son had looked at his watch in the hospital room, announced he had to leave for a business dinner, and walked out. Arthur was left sitting in a plastic chair to sign his wife's death certificate entirely alone. Elena cried. She pulled her knees to her chest and wept. She told us about being 14 years old, standing in a suburban hallway, packing her meager belongings into a black, hefty trash bag for the 6th time. She described the exact tone of voice her foster parents used when they told the social worker they were sending her back because she had gotten caught shoplifting a box of granola bars. They had told her they loved her the week before. Marcus stared at the floor, his jaw tight. He talked about the suffocating, emasculating shame of standing in a sterile bankruptcy court. He talked about the moment he realized his ex-wife had successfully hidden hundreds of thousands of dollars in offshore assets, leaving him with nothing, and feeling like a complete, irredeemable failure of a man. And I talked about Richard and Helen. I talked about the grandfather clock. I described the smell of the dust in my mother's hallway, the screeching pitch of Helen's voice, the hollow, echoing realization that I was entirely alone in the world. I told them what it felt like to be surrounded by people who shared my face, who shared my eyes, but who actively wanted me dead, so they could read the will and divide my bank accounts. We bonded. My God, we bonded. It felt incredibly, undeniably real. When you sit in a room and share your deepest, darkest, most humiliating shames with someone, and they don't run away, a chemical reaction happens in the brain. The walls come down. You feel tethered to them by an invisible, unbreakable wire. We started hugging. Genuine, tight embraces. We started cooking meals together naturally, without being prompted by a schedule. I would wake up and find Elena and Marcus laughing in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. Elena would tease Marcus about his obsessive, neurotic need to keep the marble counters wiped down, and he would smile. A real, unforced smile. Arthur would fall asleep in his leather armchair by the fire, the book slipping from his hands, and I would walk over and place a heavy wool blanket over him. In those moments, looking down at his sleeping face, I felt a genuine, overwhelming rush of affection that I hadn't felt for my own biological father in 30 years. It was working. I felt entirely vindicated. I walked the grounds of the estate feeling like a pioneer who had finally discovered a cure for the human condition. But forced proximity also brings forced friction. You cannot cheat human nature entirely. When you artificially bypass the polite, guarded phase of a relationship, you bypass the buffer. You strip away the shock absorbers. The honeymoon period ended abruptly around month 4, and the grinding reality of living with adults who had 50 years of their own deeply ingrained habits and traumas began to set in. It started with small things. the exact kind of mundane domestic friction that eats away at biological families too. Elena was used to living alone. She had survived by acting entirely on impulse, trusting no one. She would take one of the shared cars, a heavy SUV, and disappear into the city for 2 days without telling a soul. She wouldn't answer her phone. Arthur would pace the kitchen, worried sick, imagining her in a ditch. When she finally returned, casually tossing the keys on the counter, Marcus confronted her. He demanded accountability. She blew up. She screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice echoing off the high ceilings, telling him that he wasn't her real father, that he was just a paid roommate, and she didn't need a curfew. Marcus, on the other hand, was hyperfixated on the shared household budget. Even though I was funding the entire household, even though I had placed millions of dollars into the operational trust to ensure we never had to worry about money, Marcus reviewed the grocery receipts like an IRS auditor. He would sit at the island with a highlighter, scrutinizing every purchase. He would make sharp, passive-aggressive comments if I bought an expensive bottle of imported wine or if Elena ordered too much sushi takeout. It was his lingering trauma from his bankruptcy. It was his deep-seated terror of running out of money, bleeding into our daily lives, poisoning the atmosphere. Arthur was losing his hearing. He stubbornly refused to admit it, refusing to wear the aids the audiologist provided. It led to constant, frustrating misunderstandings. He would leave the television in the sunroom, blaring at deafening volumes in the middle of the afternoon, the sound of cable news anchors vibrating through the floorboards while Marcus tried to read. We fought. We sulked. We slammed doors. We retreated to our respective corners of the massive house, nursing our grievances. There were days when I sat alone in my study, the heavy doors shut, listening to Elena and Marcus argue in the hallway over something as stupid and insignificant as the thermostat setting, and I felt a cold, sharp spike of panic in my chest. What had I done? Had I just spent millions of dollars, alienated my bloodline, and uprooted my life to recreate the exact same miserable, toxic dynamic I had fled? But then, the storm would break. We would come back to the dining room table. We would sit down to dinner. Someone would pour the wine. Someone would apologize. And the crucial difference, the one thing that kept me believing in the absolute righteousness of the experiment, was the element of choice. We didn't have to be there. We were not bound by guilt. We were choosing to stay. When Marcus looked at Aleda across the table and apologized for his tone, it wasn't out of a biological obligation. He wasn't doing it because a mother was forcing him to. It was because he actually valued her presence in the house. That felt heavier. It felt more substantial and authentic than anything my real family had ever offered me. It was during this period of normalized, bumpy, authentic domesticity that we reached the point of no return. The ultimate phase, the dismantling of the DNA myth. It was time to formalize the legal structure of our family. This wasn't just a quirky co-living arrangement anymore. I was transferring power. Real, terrifying, absolute power. I flew my attorney, Harrison, out from Chicago to the house. He arrived with a briefcase full of dread and paperwork. I had hired a private chef for the night. We sat in the formal dining room, the crystal glasses gleaming under the chandelier. We ate filet mignon. We poured absurdly expensive champagne. And then, one by one, with Harrison watching in grim silence, we signed the documents. I signed over my durable power of attorney for healthcare to Elena and Marcus jointly. I looked them in the eyes as I did it. If I was ever incapacitated, if my brain or body failed, they would make the decisions about my life. They would dictate my treatment. They would decide when to pull the plug. I signed the broad financial power of attorney over to Marcus. With a stroke of a pen, he now had legal access to my primary accounts. He had the ability to manage my assets, sell my properties, and move my money if I could not. And finally, I signed the irrevocable trust documents, the estate, the massive liquid assets, the diverse investment portfolios. Upon my death, it would all be divided equally among Arthur, Marcus, and Alina. They were my sole heirs. The bloodline was dead. Long live the Hollis family. As I watched Elena take the pen and sign her name to acknowledge the trust, I saw her hand shake. She looked up at me from across the mahogany table. There were real tears welling in her eyes, reflecting the candlelight. She whispered, her voice cracking, "I've never belonged anywhere before." I felt a profound, intoxicating, almost arrogant sense of triumph. I had done it. I had beaten the system. I had bought love, structured it with contracts, and it was working. The societal pushback, however, was immediate, violent, and unrelenting. My biological family didn't know the exact specifics of my daily life, but they constantly kept tabs on my lawyers and my property records, like vultures circling a dying animal. When the legal name changes hit the public registry, and when the massive transfer of the primary estate into the Hollis Family Trust was legally recorded, my biological sister Helen went scorched earth. She left me 14 voicemails in a span of 2 days. I sat in my study, drinking scotch, listening to them play one by one. "You are completely out of your goddamn mind, Robert," she screamed on the 5th recording, her voice cracking with a hysterical rage that made the speaker on my phone vibrate. "These people are con artists. They are grifters. They found a lonely, pathetic, aging man and they are taking you for everything you have. I am calling Adult Protective Services. I am calling the state. I am going to have you declared legally incompetent. You are robbing your own flesh and blood." My brother Richard tried a different, more insidious tactic. He sent me a long, sweeping, emotionally manipulative email. He wrote about our mother. He wrote about our childhood, about riding bikes in the summer, saying he missed his older brother and just wanted to make amends before it was too late. But he CC'd his aggressive estate lawyer on the email. It was a subtle, cowardly threat disguised as a dripping olive branch. They even tried to stir up a digital discourse to shame me into compliance. My niece, Helen's daughter, posted a long, tearful thread on social media about how a dangerous cult had brainwashed her wealthy, vulnerable uncle and stolen her family's rightful heritage. It got traction. It went viral in certain circles. People weighed in on the ethics of my life. Anonymous commenters from across the globe called me selfish. They called me delusional. They said I was a victim of elder abuse. They said you can't just replace your bloodline with a group of paid actors. I ignored all of them. I changed my phone number. I instructed Harrison to fortify the legal walls around the Hollis family with impenetrable cease and desist orders. Every threat, every scream, every desperate email from my biological family only cemented my absolute belief that I had made the right choice. They didn't care about my mental health. They didn't care about my soul. They cared about the money slipping through their greedy fingers. The venom in Helen's voice wasn't grief for a lost brother. It was the sheer existential panic of a parasite being forcibly detached from its host. For the next 2 years, the Hollis family thrived. We settled into a beautiful, predictable rhythm. We celebrated holidays together, completely insulated from the toxic expectations of the outside world. We created our own bizarre, wonderful traditions. On Thanksgiving, instead of a dry turkey and arguments, we made homemade pizzas from scratch, getting flour all over the marble counters, and watched old black and white Noir movies in the theater room. On Arthur's 80th birthday, we rented a pontoon boat and went out on the lake, drinking cheap beer, watching the sun set over the water. We were a family. I was so entirely sure of it. I had bought an illusion so perfect, so detailed, that I forgot it was an illusion. And then the first real crisis hit. It was a Tuesday morning in November. The air outside was freezing, a bitter frost coating the windows, the trees stripped bare of their leaves. I was in the kitchen, standing by the espresso machine, making coffee. The house smelled of roasted beans and morning quiet. Marcus was sitting at the island reading the physical newspaper, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Elena was upstairs, the sound of her hairdryer humming as she got ready for work. Arthur was in the sunroom, dozing in a patch of pale sunlight. I reached up into the cabinet for my favorite mug. It was the ceramic mug Elena had bought me for our first Father's Day together. I never touched it. I didn't feel pain. Not at first. What I felt was a sudden, violent, terrifying detachment from reality. The entire left side of the kitchen, the cabinets, the refrigerator, the window, seemed to simply cease existing. My vision warped. The hardwood floor rushed up to my face, but my brain couldn't send the signal to my hands to put them out to stop the fall. My right arm was completely, utterly dead weight. I hit the floor hard. The impact rattled my teeth. I heard Marcus shout my name, his chair scraping violently against the floorboards. I tried to reply. I tried to look up and say, "I'm fine, Marcus, I just tripped," but the words didn't form. They came out of my mouth as a thick, wet, guttural slur. I felt a horrifying slackness. The right side of my face had melted off my skull. It was a severe ischemic stroke. A massive blood clot had lodged itself squarely in my middle cerebral artery, starving my brain of oxygen. The next 48 hours were a chaotic, fragmented blur of sensory nightmares. The wail of the ambulance sirens, the blinding, aggressive glare of fluorescent hospital lights flashing past as I was rolled down corridors, the sharp, metallic smell of iodine, rubbing alcohol, and bleach, and above it all, the terrifying, suffocating, helpless sensation of being trapped inside a failing meat suit. I was entirely conscious. My mind was awake, but I was a prisoner locked behind my own eyes. I couldn't speak coherently. I couldn't move a single muscle on my right side. I was lying in a hospital bed, exactly where I had always feared I would be, vulnerable, broken, and waiting for the end. But I had planned for this. As I lay in the ICU, listening to the rhythmic, mechanical hiss of the ventilator in the next room, I told myself this was the ultimate test of the manufactured bond. This was the moment the expensive safety net was supposed to catch me. Elena, Marcus, and Arthur were my medical proxies. They were in charge. For the first week in the ICU, they passed the test. They were there. Elena sat by my bed, her eyes red and puffy, crying into my sheets. Arthur sat in the corner chair for hours, holding my limp left hand in his frail, spotted fingers. Marcus stood by the door, speaking to the neurologists. He took meticulous notes on his tablet, asking sharp, highly intelligent questions about clot-busting drugs, tissue plasminogen activators, and neuroplasticity. Lying there, unable to speak, I felt a wave of immense, validating gratitude wash over me. If I had been with my biological family, Helen would be pulling the doctor aside to ask exactly how long I had left so she could call the realtor. Richard would be trying to find the combination to my wall safe at the house. But my chosen family was stepping up. They were leaning into their roles. Then, the acute crisis ended. I didn't die. I stabilized. I was transferred from the high-drama environment of the ICU to a step-down neurological rehabilitation unit on the 4th floor. The adrenaline faded, and the long, grueling, staggeringly expensive reality of long-term medical care began. I needed a feeding tube initially because I couldn't swallow safely. I needed intense daily speech therapy. I needed occupational therapy just to learn how to hold a spoon. I needed physical therapy to stop my muscles from atrophying. I needed round-the-clock, highly specialized nursing care. And that is when the relationship shifted. That is when the beautiful, expensive foundation of my engineered family began to crack under the massive, crushing weight of an unplanned emergency. When you are paralyzed in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, people tend to forget you were actually in the room. They assume because your body is broken, your mind is absent. But my hearing was perfectly fine. My cognitive processing, while slow and foggy, was entirely intact. I absorbed everything. The visits from my chosen family started to change. They didn't come together as a united front anymore. They came in shifts. Staggered, brief appearances. It felt less like a family gathering lovingly around a sickbed and more like employees punching a time clock to fulfill a contractual quota. They would come into the room, sit down, and almost immediately check their phones. They would make strained, awkward small talk about the weather or the traffic, small talk I physically couldn't respond to, and then they would subtly look at their watches. The warmth was gone, replaced by duty. The concrete sensory turning point, the exact moment the blind spot finally dissolved into dust, happened on a gray Thursday afternoon, about a month into my grueling rehab. I was lying in bed. The door to my private room was cracked open about 3 inches. Marcus and Alina were standing in the hallway, just outside my door. The hospital corridor was quiet, save for the squeak of a nurse's rubber shoes and the rhythmic, distant beep of a heart monitor down the hall. They thought I was asleep. I waited for the tone of a grieving daughter, desperate to heal her father. But her voice was flat. It was clinical. It was the voice of an accountant. $32,000 a month, Marcus replied. Silence hung in the hallway. I lay in my bed, the sheets heavy on my chest, my heart hammering violently against my ribs, entirely unable to move or make a sound. Marcus, that's almost $400,000 a year if he stays there, Elena said, her voice dropping lower, tighter. Plus the modifications we'd have to make to the house if he ever actually comes back. The wheelchair ramps, the custom wet room, the 24/7 in-home private nursing staff. It's going to completely drain the primary liquid account. I know, Marcus said. I heard him sigh heavily, the sound of a man burdened by math. I ran the projections this morning. If he requires this level of care for the next 5 to 10 years, it eats into the principal of the trust by at least 40%, maybe more, depending on inflation and rising medical costs. So what do we do? Elena asked. There's a state-subsidized facility closer to the city. It's not as nice, the ratio of nurses to patients is much lower, but it's covered by his Medicare and the out-of-pocket is negligible. It protects the estate. Would the state facility do the speech therapy every day? There was a brief hesitation in her voice, a flicker of guilt. 3 days a week, Marcus said quickly, smoothing over her doubt. Oakwood does it every day. But Elena, we have to look at the big picture here. Robert wanted us to build a legacy. He wanted to ensure our futures. If we burn through $500,000 a year keeping him in a luxury rehab center, we are compromising the very financial security he set up for us. We have a fiduciary duty to the trust. We have to be smart. I guess, Elena said softly. It just feels cold. It's not cold, It's practical," Marcus said, his voice hardening, slipping fully into the role of the estate manager. "This is what he hired us for, to manage the estate responsibly. I'm going to tell the doctor we are opting for the state facility. I hold the financial power of attorney. It's my call." I lay there, staring up at the acoustic ceiling tiles, counting the little perforated holes in the white cardboard. 1, 2, 3, 4. A single tear rolled out of my left eye. It tracked hot and fast down my cheek, pooling uncomfortably in my ear. I couldn't reach my arm up to wipe it away. I thought I had been so brilliant. I thought I was replacing the toxic greed of my biological family with logic and choice. But I hadn't bypassed human nature at all. I had just imported a new, colder kind of transaction. My biological family wanted my money, yes. They were greedy and selfish. But blood ties, for all their immense toxicity, have a messy, irrational, deeply ingrained obligation that sometimes survives even the bitterest resentment. If my sister Helen had been standing in that hallway, she might have yelled at the doctor. She might have complained loudly to anyone who would listen about the terrible inconvenience of my stroke. She might have hated me for surviving, but she wouldn't have downgraded my stroke rehabilitation to protect her future inheritance. The profound shame of community, the deeply wired, ancient biological instinct of pack survival would have forced me to put me in the good facility. She would have wanted the best doctors because my blood was her blood. But Marcus and Alina, they were strangers. We had bonded over trauma, yes. We had shared tears by a crackling fireplace. We had legally changed our names and printed new passports. But underneath all that highly curated, deeply engineered intimacy, the core mechanism of our relationship was a contract. I bought them. I was their employer. And because I bought them, they viewed my life, my suffering, through the cold, unforgiving lens of a balance sheet. I had wanted to evaluate if the deliberate choice of a family could withstand the exact same pressures that tear biological units apart. Lying in that bed, unable to speak, I got my answer. It was a devastating, echoing no. A deliberate choice is conditional. It is based entirely on a mutual exchange of value. When I was the wealthy, charming patriarch holding court in the library, pouring wine and dispensing wisdom, I had immense value. When I became a paralyzed, drooling liability burning through 30 grand a month, my value plummeted below zero. The basic instinct of self-preservation in strangers easily overrode the manufactured love I had purchased. I had handed the absolute keys to my life to people who, fundamentally, were just waiting for the project to conclude so they could get paid. 3 days later, they moved me to the state facility. It smelled intensely of boiled cabbage, bleach, and industrial floor cleaner. The paint on the walls was peeling, the nurses were chronically overworked, exhausted, and impatient. The speech therapist only came on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 20 minutes. I spent hours, days, weeks staring at the blank, off-white wall of a shared room, my mind entirely trapped in a broken cage, drowning in the bitter, acidic realization of my own hubris. I had engineered my own trap. I had built my own prison. I had been so utterly terrified of being used by my blood that I paid strangers millions of dollars to use me instead. And I willingly gave them the legal right to dictate the absolute terms of my suffering. It took me 8 months to learn how to speak again. 8 agonizing, frustrating, humiliating months of repetition. Moving my tongue, forming vowels, sounding like a child. 8 months of my chosen family visiting twice a week. They would walk in, bringing me cheap magazines I couldn't hold, patting my unfeeling hand and looking everywhere but my eyes. They knew I knew. I could see it in their stiff posture. There was a quiet, terrible, suffocating understanding settling between us in that sterile room. The veil had dropped. The theater was over. When I finally regained enough mobility in my leg to walk with a heavy metal quad cane and enough motor function in my mouth to be understood when I spoke slowly, the facility discharged me. I didn't go to a halfway house. I didn't go to an assisted living facility. I went back to the estate. Arthur was standing on the grand front porch when the white medical transport van pulled up the long, winding driveway. He looked older, frailer. He leaned against the stone pillar. Marcus and Elena were waiting just inside the foyer. They had a cheap, glossy, "Welcome home" banners strung up across the grand wooden staircase. The driver helped me out. I hobbled up the steps, dragging my right leg, panting with the exertion. I pushed through the heavy front door. Marcus immediately reached out to take my coat, flashing a tight, perfectly rehearsed smile. "It's good to have you back, Robert," Marcus said, his voice smooth, practiced, betraying nothing. "We missed you so much," Elena said. She stepped forward to hug me, being careful not to bump my cane. As she leaned in, I smelled her. She smelled like expensive boutique perfume. Perfume she bought with the trust account while I was eating pureed food in a state-run bed. I stood there on the hardwood floor, leaning heavily on the cold metal of my cane. I looked at Marcus. I looked at Elena. I looked at Arthur standing in the doorway. I didn't scream. I didn't break down crying. I didn't accuse them of betrayal. The time for emotional outbursts, the time for begging for love, had died a slow death in that hospital bed. I just looked at them with a profound, hollow, terrifying clarity. "Thank you," I said. My voice was raspy, thick, and slow. "It is good to be home." Later that night, I sat entirely alone in my dark study. The massive house was dead quiet. I turned on my computer and pulled up the PDF scans of the legal documents. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. I looked at the irrevocable trust. I looked at the power of attorney. Could I undo it? Yes. Legally, I could call Harrison in the morning. I could revoke the POAs. I could endure years of vicious, expensive public litigation to try and break the irrevocable trust. I could legally evict them, kick them out of the house, and fire them. But then what? I would be a disabled, semi-paralyzed 63-year-old man living entirely alone in a massive, echoing house. I had burned the bridges with my biological family to ash. I had salted the earth. Helen wouldn't take my call if I was dying on the street. Richard would laugh in my face and hang up. I had publicly, brutally humiliated them to build this grand social experiment. If I fired my chosen family now, I would have absolutely nothing. No one to call the ambulance if I fell in the shower again. No one to sit at the opposite end of the dining room table. No one to even pretend they cared if I woke up in the morning. So, I closed the laptop. I did nothing. I accepted my punishment. The experiment continues to this day. We still live together in the Hudson Valley state. We are moving past the crisis and settling into a permanent, frozen life together. Every morning, the routine plays out. We eat breakfast in the sunroom. Marcus drinks his espresso and reads the paper. Elena talks animatedly about her new design clients in the city. Arthur nods off in his rocking chair. I sit at the head of the table, leaning on my cane, slowly sipping my coffee. We play our parts beautifully. We are relentlessly polite. We ask each other's days with practiced interest. But the intimacy is dead. It is a rotting corpse that we dress up in nice clothes every morning and prop in the corner of the room, pretending we don't smell it. Anyone sitting alone in a big, empty house right now, looking at photos of their estranged children or greedy siblings, thinking about burning it all down and starting over? Define your own sense of belonging based on active presence, yes. Find friends, find a community, volunteer. But do not fool yourself into thinking you can buy loyalty. Do not think you can engineer a family out of thin air with contracts and cash just to escape the agonizing pain of the one you were given. Because when the lights go out, when your body fails and the monitors start beeping in the dark, the family you deliberately chose might just look at you, pull out a calculator, do the math, and decide you simply aren't worth the investment. I just sit here now, paying an exorbitant daily rate for my own presence in this house. I sit in my study, listening to the heavy, rhythmic ticking of the antique grandfather clock I bought to replace the one my siblings fought over. I am legally bound. The trust is sealed. I have successfully replaced my family, and it is the loneliest thing I have ever done.